The cold, sterile air of the prison cell wrapped around Solara like a suffocating blanket. The walls, made of rough stone, seemed to close in on her with every passing second. The flickering lights cast harsh shadows on the floor, but she barely noticed. Her body was consumed with pain, a deep, gnawing agony that surged through her veins like fire. Her head throbbed, and her chest felt as though it might collapse under the weight of the torment. Solara had fought many battles in her life, wars for her people, skirmishes in distant star systems, and duels with those who dared challenge her, but none of those had compared to the suffering she endured now. The curse had come upon her when she was still young, a legacy of the ancient times of her people. The Thalorans. For centuries, they had been plagued by the curse of their ancestors, a torment that could not be undone, a wound that time could not heal. The curse was not like any ordinary affliction. It wasn't something that could be cured with medicine or magic. No, it was a part of her very being, intertwined with her soul. The agony was not constant, but it came in waves, violent, overwhelming surges of pain that left her powerless to do anything but scream and writhe in misery. When the waves of pain came, she felt as though she was being torn apart from the inside out. It was a torture that no one should have to endure. Her people had tried everything to rid themselves of the curse. They had sought the aid of powerful healers, ancient artifacts, and even the knowledge of other races. But nothing had worked. The pain would ebb for a short time, but it always returned, more intense than before. And so, here she was, alone in this dark cell, with only the torment to keep her company. She could hear the distant sounds of the bustling prison outside, but they seemed far away, like something from another world. Her world, the world of the Thalorans, was a distant memory now. There was only pain, and the never-ending cycle of despair that followed it. The pain was so intense that it almost felt as though she was suffocating. She gasped for air, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She tried to steady her breathing, but it was impossible. Her mind began to spin, and her vision blurred. She closed her eyes, hoping for some relief, but none came. All she could feel was the searing heat in her veins, the burning in her chest, the crushing weight in her head. In the distance, she could hear the sound of footsteps approaching. She didn't care. Who could possibly help her? Who would dare to come near her when they knew what she carried inside? The curse had made her a monster in the eyes of many. Even her own people had turned away from her in fear, unwilling to bear witness to her suffering. No one understood, no one cared. The footsteps grew louder, and for a moment Solara wondered if she was imagining them. But then the door to her cell opened, and a figure stepped inside. She looked up, her vision swimming in and out of focus, but she saw him clearly enough. He was human. He wore the uniform of a soldier, his clothes simple but functional. His face was rugged, his dark hair short and cropped. His eyes, however, were what caught her attention. They were a piercing blue, sharp and focused, but there was something in them, something different from the others she had encountered. Where others had looked at her with fear or disgust, this man's eyes held something else. Was it pity? She narrowed her eyes, struggling to focus. Who was this man? And what did he want with her? She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat, her body still racked with pain. All she could manage was a low, guttural moan. The human soldier stepped closer, his boots echoing on the stone floor. He knelt down beside her, his expression one of determination. But there was something softer in his gaze. He didn't flinch when he saw the state she was in, didn't recoil from the raw agony that consumed her. Instead, he reached out, his hand hovering near her arm, as if unsure of how to proceed. "Are you in pain?" he asked, his voice low and steady, like the sound of distant thunder. His accent was thick, but his words were clear. Solara's eyes narrowed even further, and she shook her head weakly. Of course, he could see the pain. It was as obvious as the scars on her body, the ones that told the story of her people's endless battles. She didn't need to answer him. He knew. He had seen it all before, no doubt. But this man wasn't like the others. He wasn't here to pity her or make false promises of salvation. He was here because something inside him had driven him to act. "I'm Captain Ethan James," the soldier continued, his voice calm and reassuring. "I've been told about your condition, about what you're going through. I'm here to help." Solara couldn't help but scoff at the absurdity of his words. Help? How could he help her? No one had been able to help her before. She had seen the looks of disbelief in the eyes of the healers, the anger of those who had once been her allies. They had all turned away, unwilling to face the reality of her curse. But this man, Ethan, seemed different. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation, just determination. It was almost as if he believed, deep down, that he could make a difference. "You can't help me," she managed to rasp, her voice barely more than a whisper. "No, one can." Instead, he sat down beside her, his presence surprisingly comforting despite the coldness of the cell. "I don't know if I can cure you, but I can try, if you'll let me." Solara looked at him, her eyes narrowing as she studied his face. What was it about this man that made him so different? She had no reason to trust him, no reason to believe his words, but for some reason, she found herself drawn to him, a strange sense of calm washing over her in the face of his unwavering gaze. "Why?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly with the effort. "Why would you help me?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, as though considering his response carefully. "Because I believe that even the most hopeless situations can be changed. I believe that no one should suffer alone." His words struck something deep within Solara, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to hope for anything, let alone for someone else to care. Her people had long since given up on her, and the galaxy had moved on. But here was this human, a stranger, willing to help her in a way no one else had. "I can't promise you anything," he continued, "but I'll stay with you. I'll try." For the first time in a long while, Solara felt a flicker of something inside her. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the desire to believe in something, in someone. Whatever it was enough to make her lower her guard, even if only slightly. "Do what you can," she said, her voice weak but steady. "But know this, if you fail, I won't be able to stop what happens next. Then I won't fail." As the pain surged through her again, Solara closed her eyes, feeling the heat in her veins intensify. It was as though the curse was mocking her, daring her to believe in anything but the endless cycle of agony. But Ethan's presence remained steady beside her, his touch a calming force that, for the first time, made her believe that there might be something more to this moment than mere suffering. And so, in that moment, as her world spun out of control and the pain threatened to overwhelm her once again, she allowed herself to trust him. She allowed herself to believe, if only for a brief moment, that maybe, just maybe, this man could be the one to change everything. Ethan sat quietly beside Solara, his presence steady and unwavering. The flickering lights of the prison cell cast long, strange shadows on the stone walls, but he didn't seem to notice them. His attention was entirely focused on the alien woman beside him, whose body was still trembling with the agony that had consumed her for so long. The pain had not eased, not in the slightest. Solara's breath came in shallow, labored gasps as her body contorted in response to the latest wave of torment. Her face twisted in distress, and her eyes closed tightly, as though trying to block out the world around her. But no matter how hard she tried, the pain always found a way in. Ethan could feel the intensity of her suffering. It was as if the very air in the room thickened with her anguish. Every time she winced or cried out, it felt like a weight pressing down on him, threatening to crush him under its unbearable pressure. He could only imagine what it must be like for her, how she had endured this alone for so long. But he wasn't going to leave her. Not now. He had made a promise, even if it was only to himself. He would stay with her, even if it meant facing the darkness of her torment. There was something about her, something deep within her eyes, that made him believe she wasn't just some alien creature to be ignored or feared. She was a living, breathing being with a past, a story, and perhaps even a future. As the minutes passed, the room remained eerily quiet, except for the soft sound of Solera's breathing, interrupted only by the occasional sharp intake of air as the next wave of pain crashed over her. Ethan sat silently, watching, waiting for a chance to help. He knew he couldn't heal her immediately, but there had to be something he could do. He couldn't just sit back and watch her suffer. "Solara," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Do you want to talk about it?"
About the pain?
At first, there was no response. She simply clenched her fists and squeezed her eyes shut even tighter. But after a few moments, she exhaled slowly, the harshness of her breath easing just a little. "Talking won't help," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if the very act of speaking drained what little energy she had left. "No one understands. No one can." Ethan nodded, his heart aching at the hopelessness in her words. "Maybe not. But I'm here. You're not alone anymore." Solara's lips twitched, and for a brief moment, it almost looked like she might smile. But then the pain hit again, and the expression vanished, replaced by a grimace as her body arched violently. Ethan's instinct was to reach out, to do something, anything, to help ease her suffering, but he held back. He couldn't just grab her, not without knowing what effect it might have. Instead, he watched helplessly as she suffered, feeling utterly powerless. He had been trained for combat, trained to face down enemies in the battlefield, but none of that had prepared him for this. None of it had prepared him for the anguish of someone else, the helplessness of watching them endure something so horrific. Ethan had never seen someone in so much pain. And the longer he watched Solara, the more he realized how much she had been through, how much she had endured on her own. The curse that plagued her wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual even. It had isolated her from her own people, from the very people who should have cared for her. It had driven her into this cold, dark prison and left her alone to face a torment that had no end in sight. It was then that he knew. He couldn't just sit here and wait. He had to do something. But what? He wasn't a healer, and he didn't have the power to undo ancient curses. He couldn't promise her that he could make it stop. But he could promise her something else. He could promise her that he wouldn't abandon her, no matter how hopeless things seemed. "Solara," Ethan said again, his voice firm yet gentle. "I know this pain is unbearable. I can see it. But I need you to listen to me. I don't know what's happening inside you, but I know that I want to help. You don't have to face this alone anymore." Her eyes flickered open again, and this time, they met his gaze. For a moment, they just stared at each other, as if searching for something. Hope? Understanding? Perhaps both. Slowly, Solara's body relaxed, just a little. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though the pain was still there, still clawing at her from every angle. "You don't understand," she said softly, her voice a mere whisper. "This curse, it's part of me. It always has been. I've tried everything."
"No one can help me." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful.
"Maybe that's true. Maybe you've tried everything. But I haven't tried everything yet." He hesitated, then placed a hand gently on her arm, his touch light but firm.
"I don't know if I can take away the pain, but I can stay here."
"I can be here with you." Solara tensed at first, her eyes wide with surprise. But Ethan's touch was not like the others she had encountered. There was no pity in his hand, no judgment. His touch was steady, warm in its own way. And for the first time in a long while, Solara allowed herself to feel something other than pain. She allowed herself to feel not alone. Her breath stuttered, and she fought to keep the tears from spilling over. She hadn't let herself cry in years, not since the curse had taken everything from her. But in that moment, as Ethan's hand remained on her arm, as he simply sat there, steady and present, she felt the slightest shift within herself, a small glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Hope. "What do you think will happen if I stay?" Solara asked, her voice barely above a whisper filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. Ethan looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "I don't know what will happen, but I believe we have to try." "If I can't heal the curse, maybe I can help you face it. Maybe together we can find a way." The words felt almost too simple, too naive. But Solara found herself wanting to believe them. She had been alone for so long that it was hard to imagine what it would be like to share this burden with someone else, to share her pain, to share her story. And yet, here was this man, this human, who was offering to do just that. Ethan's words settled in her mind like seeds, taking root in the quiet places of her heart. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was more to this than just the curse. Maybe there was something else they could discover together. As the next wave of pain hit her, Solara flinched, and for a brief moment, the room seemed to spin. She could feel the burning inside her, the sharp edges of the curse slicing through her once again. But this time, it wasn't just her alone in the dark. This time, there was someone beside her. Someone who cared. And that made all the difference. Ethan didn't move his hand. He didn't pull away or flinch from her pain. He simply stayed there, grounded and present. And somehow, in that simple act of staying, he gave her something she hadn't had in years, the possibility of peace, the possibility of healing. Solara closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest for a moment, trusting in his presence. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel quite so alone. And that, in itself, was a small victory. Ethan's presence beside Solara had become a constant. Every day he came to her cell, offering not just his time, but his quiet strength. His touch, gentle but firm, had become something of a lifeline, grounding her in the midst of her suffering. Even though the pain still surged through her body with each passing moment, there was a calm that she hadn't known before, a calm that only Ethan's steady presence seemed to bring. The days had blurred together, the hours stretching on as the two of them sat together in the cold, dimly lit room. There was no cure for Solara's condition. Not yet. But something had changed in her. Her body still writhed in agony, her mind still haunted by the curse. But there was a shift inside her. The raw despair that had once consumed her was beginning to fade, replaced by something softer, something more hopeful. Solara had spent so many years alone, hiding from others, keeping her pain locked away. She had believed that no one could understand, that no one could possibly help her. But Ethan's quiet determination had begun to chip away at the walls she had built around herself. His willingness to be there, day after day without asking for anything in return, was slowly changing her. She couldn't explain it, but she felt something stirring deep within her. A feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in years. Hope. It was a strange and foreign thing for her, this hope. It felt almost like a dream, something she couldn't reach. But every time Ethan placed his hand on hers, every time he whispered words of encouragement, she felt it inch a little closer. Maybe, just maybe, she could let go of the fear. Maybe, just maybe, she could believe in something beyond the curse. The pain, though, was still there. It never truly went away. It came in waves, fierce and unrelenting, crashing through her like a storm. But now, there was something different about the way she faced it. Ethan's presence, his calmness, seemed to ease the edges of the pain, just enough for her to breathe through it. It wasn't a cure, not by any means, but it was something. One evening, as the light of the twin moons outside the prison flickered through the small window, Solara felt the familiar pull of the curse tightening in her chest. Her breath quickened, and she squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back the scream that threatened to break free. Ethan was sitting beside her, as always, his hand resting on her arm. She could feel his warmth, his steady presence, even as the pain intensified. His voice was soft, just a whisper in the chaos of her mind. "I'm here, Solara."
Just breathe. You're not alone.
To calm the storm inside her, but it was hard, so hard. The agony was unbearable, every nerve in her body alive with fire. It felt as though her skin might rip open from the pressure. "Ethan," she gasped, her voice breaking. I can't do this anymore. It's too much." He didn't pull away, didn't back off. Instead, his grip tightened slightly, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her arm. "Yes, you can," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "You've been through worse. You've survived this long, and you're not going to give up now." Her chest heaved as she fought for breath. But his words, his simple, quiet words, cut through the fog of pain. They grounded her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. That she had someone with her, someone who believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax just a little. She let go of the tension that had been building in her shoulders, the tightness in her chest. It didn't stop the pain. It never did. But it made it easier to bear, if only for a moment. As the wave of agony began to subside, she took a deep, shaky breath and opened her eyes. She glanced at Ethan, and this time, she saw something different in his gaze. It wasn't pity. It wasn't even sympathy. It was something deeper, something more genuine. It was care. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Ethan smiled, gently, his eyes softening.
I'm not going anywhere, Solara.
Those simple words meant more to her than she could express. For the first time, she didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like something to be feared or pitied. She was just Solara, another living being, struggling through pain, but not doing it alone. They sat together in silence for a while, the moments stretching out between them. Solara's breathing slowed as the pain gradually faded, leaving only the dull ache that lingered in her bones. But even that felt bearable, as long as Ethan was there. It was then that something new began to stir inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. A deep, aching need, a desire for more than just relief from the pain. She wanted more than just to survive. She wanted to live. She wanted to be free, but she wasn't sure how to get there. She had spent so long trapped in the curse, in the pain, that the idea of freedom seemed foreign to her. The curse had been a part of her for so long. It had shaped her life, dictated her choices, and isolated her from everyone else. How could she possibly break free from something that had been with her for so long? Ethan's presence beside her was a reminder that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out. Maybe, with him by her side, there was hope for something better. But it wasn't just about the curse. It was about her life, her future. She had spent so much time fighting the pain, but now she realized there was more to fight for. There was more to life than the endless torment. As if sensing the change in her, Ethan turned to her, his voice quiet but steady. "Solara, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we can get rid of the curse, but I do know this. You don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to face this by yourself." She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always kept her distance from others, always shut them out. But Ethan had been different from the start. He didn't judge her. He didn't try to fix her. He just stayed. And for the first time in years, she found herself wondering if it was possible to let someone in, if it was possible to trust again.
"I've never let anyone close," she admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Not after everything."
Not after what happened to me. The curse.
It's not just a part of me. It's everything.
It's all I've known. Ethan's expression softened, and he reached out, placing a hand gently on hers.
I don't need to be a part of your past, Solara.
I'm just here for your present.
For you, right now, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together.
Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She had never been good at expressing her feelings, especially not when it came to something as raw and vulnerable as this. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the need to say anything. Ethan's words were enough. His actions were enough. They sat together in silence again. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It wasn't filled with the weight of the past or the burden of the curse. It was simply two people, sitting side by side, sharing a quiet understanding. It was a moment of peace, a fleeting but precious thing that Solara hadn't felt in so long. And as the hours passed, as the pain ebbed away into nothingness once more, Solara realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was starting to heal. Slowly but surely, she was beginning to let go of the past and the fear that had held her captive for so long. And with Ethan by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. The future, while uncertain, no longer seemed quite so terrifying. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to break free. The days continued to pass, each one marked by the subtle changes in the way Solara felt. The pain, though never fully gone, had become something she could endure. She still winced in agony, still felt the cruel grip of the curse tightening around her. But now it was different. Ethan's presence, his steady support, had become a lifeline. It wasn't that he could take away the pain. No one could. But he made it bearable. His touch, his words, his simple acts of kindness had started to heal something deep inside her, something that the curse had long since buried. Each time he visited her, Solara noticed something new. The stiffness in her shoulders slowly began to ease, her tense muscles loosening just a little. The darkness that had once clouded her mind seemed to lift, even if only for a brief moment. It was a fragile thing, this newfound peace, but it was a start towards something better. Ethan had never asked her to reveal everything about her past. He never pushed her to explain the origins of the curse, or the pain it caused. He didn't need to know. What mattered, he said, was that she was here, and that they would face whatever came next together. He had promised her that, and it was a promise he kept every day. He stayed with her, even when she struggled to believe that there was hope for herself. And in return, she allowed herself to lean on him, to trust him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone in years. There were moments when Solara still fought with herself, when the weight of the curse felt too much to bear. During those times, she would close her eyes and remember the warmth of Ethan's hand on hers. She remembered his words, soft but unwavering.
You're not alone. It was a simple promise, but it was a promise she had never fully believed until now.
Slowly, she began to believe in it. Slowly, she began to believe in him. One evening, as the sun set over the alien landscape outside the prison, Solara felt the familiar ache of the curse tightening around her chest. The pain came slowly at first, a dull throb that spread through her limbs like wildfire. She clenched her fists, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the wave of agony intensified. Ethan had been there for days, offering his steady presence and quiet reassurance. He was seated beside her, as usual, his hand resting lightly on her arm. This time, however, there was something different in the air. The room felt heavier, as though the curse itself was drawing closer, testing the strength of their bond.
Ethan! Solara gasped, her voice strained. It's happening again. I can feel it.
He didn't hesitate. He was already by her side, his hand gently but firmly gripping her wrist, his other hand brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm here," he said softly. "You're not alone." But Solara felt the storm rising within her. The pain was coming faster now, each wave crashing over her like a violent tide. Her body was shaking, her skin burning with fever, and she could feel the curse reaching deeper inside her, twisting and gnawing at her very soul. She couldn't escape it. She couldn't outrun it. It was all-consuming, and no matter how hard she fought, it always found its way back. "I don't think I can do this anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's too much! I don't know how much longer I can stand it." Ethan's face softened, and for a moment he said nothing. He simply sat beside her, his hand still holding hers, his gaze never leaving her face. "You've been through this before," he said finally. "You've survived, and you will survive this too. I believe in you." Solara's breath hitched at his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that there was a way out, a way to break free from the curse. But how could she? How could anyone survive something like this? The pain intensified once more, and Solara's grip on Ethan's hand tightened, her nails digging into his skin. She felt as though she was being torn apart from the inside out, the curse's grip tightening with every breath she took, her body arched, her chest heaving with the force of the agony that consumed her. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Please, make it stop." He wished more than anything that he could take away her pain, that he could do something to stop the curse from ravaging her body. But all he could do was hold her hand, offer her his strength, and stay by her side. "I can't stop the curse," he said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "But I won't leave you. Not now. Not ever." Solara's eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment she allowed herself to rest in his presence. She couldn't explain it, but the sheer certainty in his voice, the promise that he wouldn't abandon her, calmed her just enough to breathe. Maybe she couldn't stop the curse. Maybe she couldn't stop the pain. But Ethan was here. He wasn't going anywhere. And for the first time in a long time, that knowledge gave her the strength to keep fighting. The pain began to recede, slowly but surely, as the wave of torment ebbed away. Solara's breathing grew steadier, though the dull ache remained in her chest. She had endured this many times before, but this time there was something different. This time she didn't feel so alone. This time she had someone by her side who cared, who was willing to face the darkness with her, no matter how terrifying it seemed. Ethan didn't speak immediately. He simply sat with her in the silence that followed, allowing her the time she needed to recover. He had seen her struggle before, had seen the fear in her eyes as the curse took hold of her, but he had also seen the strength in her, the strength she didn't always see in herself. He knew that, no matter what, she would keep going. She had already proven that. After a while, Solara opened her eyes, her gaze settling on Ethan. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Ethan smiled softly, his fingers gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. I'm just doing what anyone would do. But you're the one who's been fighting this for so long. You're the one who survived all these years." She didn't know how to respond to that. She had never thought of herself as strong. In her eyes, she was just someone trapped by a curse, someone who could do nothing but endure the pain and the loneliness that came with it. But Ethan didn't see her that way. He saw her as someone capable of far more. He saw her as a person, not just as the curse she carried. For a long time, Solara had believed that the curse was everything. It had shaped her, defined her, and isolated her from the rest of the universe. But now, sitting here beside Ethan, she realized that the curse didn't define her. It was just something she had to live with, something she had to endure. But it didn't have to be the thing that controlled her life. Not anymore. "Maybe I'm stronger than I thought," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Maybe I can fight this. Maybe I don't have to let it control me." Ethan nodded, his smile growing warmer. "I know you can. You've already proven it." For the first time in a long time, Solara felt something stir deep within her. It wasn't just the hope of escaping the curse, it was the hope of something more. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to face it alone. Ethan had given her something more than she had ever hoped for, a chance at redemption, a chance to fight for something beyond the curse. He had given her a future, something she hadn't dared to dream of in years. As the hours passed and the pain slowly faded into the background, Solara found herself leaning against Ethan, her head resting on his shoulder. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but for the first time in a long time she felt at peace. "Thank you," she whispered again, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. Ethan didn't answer at first. Instead, he simply held her, his arm wrapped gently around her shoulders, providing her with the comfort and security she had long since stopped believing in. They didn't need words. In that moment, everything was understood. They had come so far, together. And no matter what the future held, Solara knew that she wasn't alone. Not anymore.